Hello. So this is a funny, interesting story. Um, I remember on one of the WhatsApp groups for micro soldering, and at some point one of the members said, "Listen, I have a problem with an iPhone 12 Pro. Can anyone from the group help?" Um, and I said, "Sure, I can help you. What's the problem?" And he said that he has a phone that he was working on. It had no Wi-Fi, so as a parenthesis, the guy owns a repair shop in a city that's quite far away from me. So he said that he had that phone for a Wi-Fi repair. It had a problem with the Wi-Fi, and he disassembled the phone and took off the boards, and he cleaned some pads between the boards on the interposer, and then when he tried to solder back the boards, his heat plate got damaged and stopped working. And he said, "Okay, if I ship you the phone, can you please help me solder back the boards?" And I said, "Fine, just ship it over here, and I'm gonna take care of it." So this is the package that I opened. First of all, I didn't like the way it was packed because they are a bit fragile, and as you see, the display was not on the phone casing, was in a separate bag. And I thought, okay, let me test it first. I usually like to test everything I receive because it can get damaged on on transport, and then the people that send it can say that, okay, the phone was fine, maybe you broke it. So I always record whenever I open a phone. I do recordings for these repairs. So here I'm trying to test the display with an iCloud locked board. uh, Unfortunately, it proved that the board is a bit defective, so it was just power cycling. It was going to 300 milliamps, then back to zero, and so on. So eventually, I figured it out that it's not a good board, so I'm gonna grab a different one and test it again. So while I'm doing that, I just want to explain that it felt a bit weird, uh, the fact that he was not able to solder back the boards, because eventually he called me again and I said, okay, why don't you use, because he said that he still has some hot plates for 11 and for XS. I said, okay, I was thinking maybe he reballed the boards, and with low mel solder this is what you should do. And I said, okay, just put them on an 11 plate and just hit it up with a hot air gun just a bit from above, and it should work. And the guy said, no, because I tried it, and I filled it up from above and the phone didn't start anymore. So that's when I said, okay. So eventually I received the phone that it's not just about soldering back the boards, it's also about trying to see why it's not powering on anymore. But still, when you reball a board, you can get various shorts and the phone cannot start anymore. So this is something normal. I was considering that it's gonna be like half an hour, I don't know, 15 minutes, half an hour job. So as you saw, the screen was working fine. Now I'm looking at the phone, and I'm gonna remove the board from the casing. That burn smell is still very powerful, and I was wondering how much did the guy hit the boards, and what problems we're gonna find there. Now with the board under the microscope I can see that it's extremely dirty. It has flux all over it. It's a weird flux. I'm thinking maybe that's the smell, that's where the smell comes from, and as you can see it's very dirty. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean the board as much as I can to get rid of that old flux that's everywhere. I know I'm a bit pedantic, and I like to clean the boards very well, and I don't like any signs of flux after I finish a job. Because this will become an extremely long video, I'm gonna fast forward parts of it because yeah, I think it's gonna be 2 hours eventually. I'm using here some hot air trying to remove the glue that was used to have those shields stuck to the back of the board. I'm not sure exactly how they are called. And now I'm cleaning the edges of the board very well. Okay, now after I managed to clean it as good as I could, I put the board on the heat plate. So the heat plate is set up to heat up. It's actually an iRepair MS1. I'm setting it up to 190 degrees, and that's for the low melt boards like X to 11 Pro Max. And when the guy said that he worked on the board and fixed some pads, cleaned them, and I was under the impression that he actually reballed the boards, but apparently that wasn't the case because they didn't go out. So now, as you see, I've set the machine to 230 Celsius, and I'm also applying hot air. So now they came over, but as we can see on the microscope, actually the boards were not reballed. So I'm not sure why there's people that look. Actually, there's on the CPU, there's still the thermal compound, and the board is really filthy of that weird flux that was used. Anyways, I'm inspecting the board now, and there are signs besides the horrible burn smell. There are signs of the boards being heavily heated up. At some point you'll see that actually the foil, the chips are exfoliating the foil above them. Also the Wi-Fi chip seems to have overheating spots. So at this point the logical thing for me was to clean everything the best that as I can. As I told you, I'm a bit pedantic with the cleaning of my work, and I like everything to be clean and crisp as new when I deliver a phone back. Also, you can notice that the phone was not reballed, and there's still the original high melt solder on it. Even, you know, if you don't remove this GUI, see here how the foil on the chip is moving, how it's exfoliating because of the flux and the heat. So if you leave this thermal compound on and you put flux and then you heat it up, it gets like stone hard, and if somebody else needs to work on the board later, it's gonna be very difficult, because it gets so hard that it sticks to the parts and you will not be able to remove parts or stuff from the board. So now I'm gently trying to clean it, to remove the thermal compound. And using here the recipient, I have IPA, and I'm using a very hard brush to scrape out all that thermal compound that was becoming like a rock. Here I'm changing the IPA, and I'm putting some clean fresh one for later. And now I'm thinking about reballing the boards, but first I'm gonna clean the old solder, because I wanna wick them, clean them very well, and then put them in the jig and see if Wi-Fi and everything, IMEI, baseband, everything is working. I'm using here some leaded solder and lots of flux, so I can remove the original solder on the boards. And now I'm wicking it again with lots of flux. I'm trying to avoid those oxidized pads that you get if you don't properly desolder the boards. As you see, there are a lot of oxidized ones, and now I'm cleaning it in some fresh IPA. Yeah, I'm using two brushes, one soft, one hard. First I'm doing the hard one, and then I'm using the soft one that cleans better between the parts. And eventually we should get an end result that's looking good, almost factory-like. See, so most of the flux is gone. And now I'm cleaning the pads that are oxidized, so the jig will make a proper contact. Also, I'm looking very well to see if there's any kind of a flux residue on the boards, because I don't want to damage my jig. For the bottom board, I'm using I'm not replacing the solder, I'm just putting a lot of flux on it, and I will just wick it like that. This is the way I'm used to handle the iPhone 12 series. I found out that there's no reason to replace the solder on the bottom board, because it wicks really well like that. I'm using the iron, a flathead on the iron that's heated up at 380 degrees. So as you say, they really clean well. And also I notice here that the shims that are placed on the interposer to have a bit of a distance between the boards are still present, so definitely the board was not reballed at all. Apparently some people just open them, work on them, and then solder them back without reballing. This is extremely weird, and I find it very difficult and also very bad for the device, because especially on this 12 series you need a lot of heat to melt that horrible solder that's between the boards. Yep. Now I'm cleaning also the bottom board very well. I'm using a microfiber cloth to wipe out the excess of IPA, and then usually after using the cloth I'm just putting some hot air on it to get rid of the excess IPA on it. Now again I'm inspecting the pads to see if there is any kind of oxidized ones, and I clean them, and I'm also making sure there is no flux on them, so I don't ruin my jig. Now I noticed that that connector has a lot of flux in it, so my OCD kicks in. I'm trying to clean it the best as I can, but there's still flux in it, so I think eventually I'm gonna grab a brush and brush it. Still dirty. Yeah. Now it feels a bit better. So here's the jig I'm using, the, how is it called? The Mega Idea brand, so it's a cheaper version of the Chanli. It's also made by Chanli, but I find their tools extremely good and never had issues with them. So if it's a bit cheaper, why not? And if it feels the same quality as the original Chanli ones. This is not a fake again, it's a division that Chanli bought some time ago, and they are still producing parts, tools. I was still under the impression that, as the guy said, the phone had a problem with Wi-Fi, so I thought that the fact that he said that the phone doesn't power on anymore, I thought it was just a short when he soldered back the boards together, but now we're gonna see the problem we're facing. Try to power on the board, so it got a full 4 amp short. And I said, okay, we might have a problem. If there was something visible and I don't know, some kind of a short, I would have seen it on the core board. I'm trying to power on only the core without the screen, without anything. So as you see, the moment I hit the power button on the power supply, it goes up to 4 amps and stays like that. The problem is that there isn't absolutely anything heating up there, so here I've fast forwarded and I've also cut a lot of this clip because I was trying to find the short. I also removed the shield over the PMIC. I found a lot of solder blobs there, so there were signs of a lot of heat up in that area, but eventually I really couldn't, you know, I spent like an hour and a half, 2 hours on it, and I really couldn't find the short. There was nothing heating up, just the power supply cord. So yeah, I'm not gonna bore you with all these details. Eventually, I said, okay, there is no way to find the short on this board, and you're gonna see eventually what I've ended up doing. So the short was on the VDD main line. And there was no heat signature, so I'm definitely sure that that the board was heated up a lot, and it had an internal short somewhere. Maybe that's why also the burn smell from the layers of the board. So of course the next reasonable thing to do to save the phone was core board swap, meaning that I'm gonna remove the CPU, the logic EEPROM, and I'm also remove the NAND in this case, and move them on an iCloud log board. I'm using here 220 degrees Celsius hot air to remove the underfill that's surrounding the processor. I'm not paying very much attention to the board here because I don't care anymore the board, so I just wanna go fast and remove the CPU as fast as possible. I really don't care if there are any pieces, parts flying around from this operation. This is in real time, so there's no speed up process during the removal of the CPU. The blade I use is a number 11 blade. You can find many variations on this. I buy this from a pharmacy. They are surgical blades number 11. You can also buy something similar from supply stores, but the ones that I use are medicinal used, so they are even how's it called? Sterile. Unfortunately, the microscope camera is not extremely well, so good, and you can't see everything that I see. So there's parts where you don't see what I am doing. Unfortunately, it's a bit difficult to pay attention to what I'm filming and what I do, especially when it's the case of removing CPUs or reballing them, which requires a lot of attention. So the cleaning around it is finished now. I'm gonna change my nozzle to an 8mm one, and I will soon start to heat up the CPU. I'm using 360 degrees and 60 air here, so 360 when I need the CPU. When I remove a CPU from a donor board, I use 380 and 60 air. I'm not sure if 380 is too much, but for a CPU to survive, but if I don't need it, I use 380. Here I'm using 360, and I'm gonna gently push in the pry tool. And when I feel it's ready to come loose, I'm just inserting the pry tool and gently lift it up. Never use force here. always try to feel when the solder is properly melt everywhere. If you use force, you're gonna break pads on the CPU, and they are very difficult to redo. On the A14 it happens sometimes to me to rip some pads on the CPU, but 99% of them are grounds. This one came out quite well. There is apparently no ripped ones, not even grounds. Because grounds usually rip the first ones, because the board where the CPU is soldered to has a very large ground, and the thermal mass is way higher than a regular pad. Again, this is real time, it's not fast forwarded, so it takes some time till I adjust my nozzles and grab my tools required for the next steps. But here I'm gonna use a lot of flux, so I'm using the NC559 Amtech one for the CPU. And I'm gonna use some leaded solder that I'm gonna put on my knife iron tip that's heated up to 270 degrees. So I usually use the iron at 380, but when working on the CPU I'm always lowering it to 270. Yeah, and I'm not scrubbing with the tip of the iron. I'm not touching the CPU, it's only the solder blob that's touching it in an attempt to replace the high melt, high temp solder on the CPU with my leaded one, which is, I think it's about 160-180 degrees melting temperature. You can also see how the balls are changing color after the leaded solder is applied. I never spend too much time on one place. I always move the blob around so I don't heat up a lot to only one place of the CPU. And now I'm cleaning with IPA. Clean it very well with a brush. And now that it's clean of flux and IPA, I'm setting my hot air gun to 170 centigrades and I think 30 air, and I'm using a tweezer, not too sharp but not too blunt. Well, it's not blunt enough to scratch the surface of the. It is blunt enough to scratch the surface of the CPU, and I'm just lifting that underfill that is stuck on the CPU. See, I'm not pushing down so I don't scratch it. I'm just using the tip of the tweezers. I'm actually using a Tool 3D tweezer. I find it the best one. Yeah, and I'm gently removing those pieces. Again, the CPU is heated now at 170 degrees Celsius only with a heat gun, so it's not a lot of heat stress as it would be if I would place the CPU on a hot plate and use flux and I don't know, I've seen people using, well, I've tried everything, but this is the method that really works for me, and I'm not damaging anything with it. I've tried a lot of things. I also bought a hot stone, I think it was called, made by Charlie, that was heating up around 200 degrees. I found out that it just ruined my CPUs. It was way too hot for it. So I think this really works for me, and you can try a lot of ways to clean them. There's a lot on YouTube. You can find a lot of technician footage on cleaning the CPU, and you can choose whatever you feel it works for you. But this, again, this is something I found out by myself, and it seems to work for me every time. So I think apparently I've cleaned most of it. Sorry again, you can't see really the whole picture. It looks pretty well. It's one of the few CPUs that I removed and I didn't crack any pad. As I told you, there's times when, well, almost every time there's at least one ground pad that remains stick on the board. But that's life. There's not a problem while there are grounds. It's okay. Now I'm applying again flux, and I'm gonna use again my 270 degrees iron with a blob of leaded solder, and just apply it everywhere again to make sure all the pads get the leaded solder on them. Always starting from the edges and slowly heat up the CPU. If you put the blob at 270 in the middle of the CPU, it will just stick there because there's not enough temperature in it to keep up with the thermal mass of the CPU. So if you go gently from the edges in, the CPU starts to it builds up some internal heat in it, so you can just go slowly with the iron over it. Again, do not scrub with the knife of the tip, with the tip, just use the solder ball gently. So this is it. I'm cleaning it again with IPA, then I'm gonna blow it with the hand pump, and that is it for preparing the CPU for a reball. After that, I'm turning back to the board. I'm actually gonna grab an iCloud lock board, and I'm gonna prepare it for receiving a new CPU. I've extremely fast forwarded the board preparation because it takes a lot of time and it's a boring and lengthy process. Okay, I'm gonna come back after the board is complete. I'm heating this one at 230 degrees. You're gonna see the end result is very good. There's no oxidized pads. I'm cleaning the bottom board and put it aside to be used on a later stage if I need it. And now I'm gonna remove again the CPU. I'm changing it with a new blade because here I need to pay a lot of attention so I don't move any caps or resistors around the CPU. All of them are extremely important. Okay, now I'm using 380 degrees to remove the CPU. I'm using a lot of flux, yes, and the leaded solder on my knife tip. And now I'm gonna wick it. Unfortunately, as you will see later, I've heated up a little bit too much the board, and yeah, you're gonna see what's going to happen when I'm gonna test it. In theory, yeah, now I'm removing the logic EEPROM, so the phone will be, the board will actually be without the CPU and the logic EEPROM, and now I'm going to power it on, yeah, to see the board consumption. On a 12 series board, we're expecting to see about 10 milliamps of current draw when it's prompted to boot and the CPU and logic EEPROM is missing. So now, as you can see, it's taking a bit more than that. It's taking 311 milliamps, and I feel that the PMIC area is heating up. Unfortunately, the PMIC is just below the CPU, so when you wick it or when you remove the CPU, there's a chance to have solder balls forming around the parts surrounding the PMIC. The problem there is that most of the parts surrounding the PMIC have a lot of underfill, and that's causing all the melt solder to actually come up, and it can create shorts on the board, as it was in this case. I don't think I filmed this part because I got a bit pissed off. It usually doesn't happen to me this. But yeah, I didn't remove the shield around the PMIC, but I've cut the heat. There's like a thin copper plate over the shield, and the shield has some windows cut in it, so you can actually use the knife and cut the copper thing around it and see what's going on the parts surrounding the PMIC. And there I've seen a cap. Well, actually, there were two caps that were shorting out because of a solder blob, which I've removed later. But unfortunately, I don't think I've recorded that part. In the meantime, I'm also removing the NAND, because the board, the iCloud log board, has an 128 gig NAND, and the original board had a 256, so I wanted to restore the phone on its original storage condition. I think here I was still looking for the short, but the camera wasn't switched, so you couldn't see anything. So this is where I've already removed the NAND on the iCloud log board, and now I'm cleaning it. I'm using again 380 degrees on the iron and a lot of flux. This is also removing parts of the NAND underfill, which is really a lot of it. This is also fast forwarded. I think it's 3 times faster than the reality. Now I'm using the hot air at 220 degrees, and I'm using that Charlie knife to remove all the underfill that is still stuck on the board. You can see there a cap that went out. Here I'm trying to clean the pads. That area is very narrow, and I'm trying to put some solder back there so I can solder back the cap. But as I try, I figure out that actually the far one of the pads is a major ground, so I figured out that eventually that cap was in parallel with other many caps, so it's actually not required to be soldered back, so I give up on soldering back. Still trying to remove all the underfill around all the parts around the NAND, because this is how I can tell if there is any kind of a moving part that is actually needed there. Using here a very tough brush to remove everything around it. Yeah, so the board is clean. No, it has no CPU, no logic EEPROM, and it has no NAND. I'm gonna try to power this on, so as I said, I'm expecting here to have about 10 milliamps current draw when it's prompted to boot. Yeah, so here we are, 10 milliamps, everything good. The board is ready to receive the CPU, the logic EEPROM, and the original NAND. Still checking around the board to see if there's any gunk that needs to be cleaned up. Now I'm applying again leaded solder on the pads so I can wick them everywhere. Good thing is that I've split the boards exceptional, so there was absolutely no oxidized pad left. So everything is looking really well. For these operations I'm not using the Amtech 559, I'm using actually the RMA something, I'm not sure exactly. Let me see if I can find one here. No, I can't find it, so I'm not sure exactly what's RMA 223 I think. But anyways, it's the stuff I buy from China, so I'm not, even if it has the made in the USA sticker on it, I don't think it's the original one. Anyways, it has no smell, it doesn't bother me, and I find it easier to work with compared to the NC559, which tends to become a bit stiffer. But it's a bit cleaner, so I'm using the 559 on CPUs and stuff like that, and I'm using the RMA to clean the pads and reball the pads. It's also more liquid and it feels like a bit oily, I don't know. It feels easier to clean the boards after. Yeah, so here I'm cleaning the board in the IPA container. I'm using a hard brush now, and later I'm gonna switch it to a softer and more dense one that helps a lot in cleaning the parts, cleaning the spaces between the parts, because this rough one doesn't have, it's not that dense. I don't know how to explain, but the soft one refines the cleaning better. Again, using the soft microfiber to clean the excess of IPA, and yeah, the board looks way better, it has no flux around it. and I say it's ready to receive on your CPU. Here I'm I'm desoldering the original NAND from the shorted board. Again, I'm using 220 degrees to clean around it. The underfill, I don't care much about the parts surrounding it because the board will never be used again. And I'm using a large 8mm nozzle with 360 degrees to remove the NAND. Once it has been removed, I'm gonna apply a lot of flux on it, and I'm gonna use my iron with a leaded solder and go over it. The iron temp is still at 380, I didn't go down to 270 as I do on the CPUs, because NANDs are not that temperature, I don't know how to say, they are not that delicate as CPU is. And now I'm wicking it. Clean it very well with IPA. With a Q-tip again, and then I'm using a microfiber that is soaked with IPA to clean it, to apply the finish cleaning. Yeah. And now it's clean, it's dry. I'm gonna take the stencil and I'm gonna use some 183 degrees solder paste, but I'm using a slightly wet paste here. I'm not drying it up because I'm gonna lift the stencil off before applying heat to melt the pads. If you use it, if you don't use a wet one, it's gonna stick to the stencil. Now I'm gonna use the hot air gun at 330 degrees 30 air to form the balls. This is still 3 times the speed. Now I need some time to actually look at the schematic and see where pin number 1 is. I'm slowly hitting the board here to apply some flux, so it melts well around it. I'm not using too many because I like to have the board a bit clean after soldering back the chip. And I'm using 350 and 50 air to solder back the chip with an 8mm nozzle. Okay, next step is to remove the logic EEPROM from the original board. I'm gonna remove it with 380 degrees 50 air. This is a very small part, so careful so it doesn't blow away. and I will reball it using again the same 183 degrees solder paste. I'm using again 330 degrees 30 air to form the balls. I'm applying some flux and I'm gonna melt them again so they properly align to the chip pads. And now I'm gonna use 350 degrees and 40 air, I think, which proved a bit too much as it's gonna fly away. Yeah, and there it goes. Let me handle it. Okay, so I'm testing the board again now to see if there is any short or something changed. Yep, so it takes 19 milliamps with the NAND on the board and with the logic EEPROM also soldered on the board, which is a good power behavior. I will proceed now to reballing the CPU. This is not fast forwarded, so it's real time. I'm taking all the paste and I will heat it up with a hot air gun so it releases the flux inside it, because I need to, then I'm gonna squeeze it very well in that paper tissue, because I need here a very dry paste. I need it to stick to the stencil very well and just drop on the CPU when it melts. The hardest part in this process is to actually clean the stencil properly. So the CPU looks good, there's no debris on it. But unfortunately I noticed that the stencil has a lot of gunk, a lot of the holes, so I'm using the hot air gun to heat it up a bit, and then I'm using the microfiber cloth with a lot of IPA to clean it and then blow it with air. And there will still be holes that are still having gunk on them, and there you can use the tweezers to remove that. can see from this image that it is still not properly clean. You can still see some dark spots. So I guess now we're ready to apply the paste. Again, this needs to be a very dry paste. Now that the paste is evenly on the stencil, we can start heating it up. I'm using 330 degrees 30 air with the 6mm nozzle. This is real time, so no fast forward. Now you can see that the balls are starting to form, so it is ready. So all looks good. There's a couple of balls that didn't form well on the lower right side, but well, I can see them, they are not sticking up to the CPU. But I'm applying some flux, and I'm gonna reflow it again, and everything will get back into place. Now we can see the balls that are actually dropped down and are touching the CPU well. I was a bit fast. I should have let it a bit more, because some of the balls weren't completely dried and they were still melted. And you can see that they are not round anymore. But anyways, we have to reflow it. One thing that I notice is there's about 3 solder balls that are extremely small there. You're gonna see in a moment. So I'm grabbing some flux. I didn't notice those balls yet, so I'm just putting some flux and I'm reflowing again, so that all the balls are even. Again, I'm using 330 degrees tortilla to reflow it. So everything looks good except 3 balls that seem, well, actually there are 4 that seem to be a bit too small. So here there are 2 of them. So I'm gonna check which ones are grounds and which ones are actually needed. I'm gonna use my multimeter. I know that the corner pads are ground, so I'm using the red probe on a corner pad, and the negative one, I'm measuring it. I can see that 3 of them are grounds and 1 is actually needed, that one. So what I'm gonna do, I'm still on the thinking process here. I'm getting the knife and I'm cutting a part of the corner ball, which I know for sure it's a ground, and I'm gonna use that solder piece on the pad that I know is good and I know I need it. And now that the solder is there, I'm heating it with 330 degrees. And unfortunately, it's not gonna go where I want it. Yeah, well, that's a problem. I'm gonna have to cut it again from that blob. That's also ground. And try it again. So this is way better now. The CPU looks good. I'm adding some extra flux here. This will help with soldering the CPU back to the motherboard. I'm adding a tiny amount of flux and spreading it out with my finger so it covers all the pads. Pads are clean and the board is ready to receive the CPU. I'm also changing my nozzle here. I'm adding an 8mm nozzle, bend nozzle to the hot air station and setting it up to 350 degrees and 50 air. I've aligned as better as I could the CPU on its place. Yeah. And now I'm holding it with the tweezer and apply some heat, but don't hold it too long, like I don't know, 3-4 seconds. And I'm applying the hot air in a circular move, extending it out towards the CPU. When you see the flux bubbling out from beneath the CPU, then it means that it's already melted. Sometimes I like to just bump it with a tweezer. Using the air pump to have the board a bit colder. Now we are prepared for a test run. This is again a bit fast forwarded. Unfortunately, I forgot to put the PSU graph on the display. As I didn't notice any short, I'm adding also the screen. Yeah, there we go. We have the power, the PSU now on the screen, and we can see normal boot behavior in the graph. We also have the Apple logo. Touch is working, we have access to the data. And everything looks fine. I'm cleaning now the pads from the flux because I wanna put the boards in the jig and test the full board while in the jig to see if there is if we have Wi-Fi and IMEI. It's important to have the pads clean because otherwise the pins on the jig might get stuck, and the device is quite expensive. You need to take care of it. I can see there's modern firmware, there is an IMEI there. We have Wi-Fi. And we have IMEI when dialing *#06#. So all is good, we can now prepare the board for Reball. So I'm using here a mechanic 148 degrees solder paste. I like to dry it up, but not very much, so you notice that it needs to be a bit wet, so I'm not applying hot air. Just once I just squeeze the paper towel, and now I'm spreading it over the stencil. This stencil you need to remove before applying hot air, so that's why the paste needs to be a bit wet when applied. Otherwise, if it's not wet, it will stick to the stencil. It's a bit tricky to find the proper moisture of the paste. I'm removing the stencil. I will clean it. And now if we have a look, we can see that all the pads are have the solder on them. And now I'm using the hot plate. I'm gonna set it to 190 degrees. It's about 20 degrees off, so that's why I go so high. It's not very accurate, but I find it the best one in the market. Now we're gonna notice the balls will start to form. I like this way of forming the balls on the heat plate. In the past I was using the hot air, but when using the hot air there were a lot of small balls left between the pads, and we needed to properly clean the board afterwards. If you notice now, there is no small balls over there, so the Reball looks exceptional. All it's left is to add some flux on it. To put it on the hot plate because it's too cold for the flux to melt, to spread around. When you do a CPU swap, the board tends to bend a bit. There's a lot of heat applied to the middle of the board, and the board is quite narrow and long. So it's a bit difficult to solder the boards back together afterwards, because as I said, it will remain a bit bent in the middle. I don't want to apply any pressure, so I'm using some hot air, I think 350 50 air now, but from far away. I like to heat up also the top board when soldering back the board, so the solder will adhere properly on the pads. As I said, I noticed that there is a tiny bit of gap in the middle, but I will ignore it for now. Gently clean the flux, the remaining flux on the sides and the bottom of the board. There's not too much, but I like it to be very clean. Now we can test it. First we'll test it without the screen, just to see if there is any short, and if the boot behavior looks good, which it does. I'm gonna add the display. You can see the Apple logo. And bummer, we do not have Wi-Fi, unfortunately. There is modern firmware there. I can see IMEI in settings. We have IMEI when dialing star pound 06 pound, but there is no Wi-Fi. So at this point I'm gonna look at the board. Yeah, we can see the board is not perfectly leveled. So I'm gonna desolder the boards, and because we used a wicked top board, I can see the pads that didn't make contact with the balls from the below. And yeah, let's check that. So now that we have the boards disconnected, I can look at the pads and see which pads didn't make contact with the bottom board. Some of these of course are ground, so I'm measuring them and see which is not a ground. So I found one that's not a ground, and it should be OL, and it's actually a wireless WLAN required. I'm gonna add here some flux, and I'm gonna use my iron tip to melt some low melt solder on that pad. So when we put the boards back, it will make the proper contact with the bottom board. This is the same. Here I messed up a bit. There's another one that needs to be fixed. The rest are grounds. So we're gonna clean now all the burnt flux. We'll also clean the bottom board. Now I'm heating up the bottom board just a tiny bit so I can spread some fresh flux on it. Now I'm ready to solder back the boards. cooling off the board so we can make a test and see if we have Wi-Fi now. We'll make a test with the board alone, without the display, just to see if there's any short. There's no short. Now I'm attaching the display. We can see a good boot power consumption behavior. First thing first, we have Wi-Fi. You can't see it because of the glare of the camera. There is modem firmware and IMEI. Yep, so it's producing the IMEI. And this is it. We have a perfectly functional phone. As you can see, we have Wi-Fi that we can turn off and on.